let you know when you're at 10:45.
Well, okay. Solitary confinement, segregation, seg, the shoe, the hole, is essentially a prison within a prison. Maybe when you have heard of solitary confinement, you may have thought it was just a necessary part of the discipline of prisoners and not thought much else. Each prisoner's experience in solitary confinement is different, but for Christina Randall, a past inmate of a Florida prison, her experience is what she describes as torture. She spent 30 days in an 8 by 10 foot cement room with a metal bed, a toilet, and a sink. That's it. Randall had one shower in 30 days, minimal water, and nothing else but her thoughts. She was in there for being wrongly accused of kissing another inmate. There was nothing she could do about this false accusation. In fact, for the first 7 days, she didn't even know why she was in there. With nothing to do, Randall counted meals to keep track of the days. It is mental torture thinking about every little thing you've done wrong, the fact you are losing game time, the struggling because you have no control, and if you are ill or something is wrong, there is no way to get help. At her specific prison, you could be in solitary confinement with another person, and initially she was placed with someone that in the middle of the night had rubbed feces all over the wall, which created a toxic breathing environment. The only airflow in the room was a small crack under the door, and when Randall banged on the door for help, no one came. When a guard finally came around 4 hours later, they laughed and said they would take care of it. It took several hours for them to move her to another cell. Randall said the worst part is the sounds. People banging their heads on the walls, screaming, and the sounds of people being restrained. So, I'll show you a video. And this is all night and all day. There are people who have been in solitary for 10 plus years with no human interaction and being put in there for something as small as gang association. Solitary confinement is overused in the United States detention facilities and has been proven to be ineffective at lowering the overall facility safety, as well as mentally and physically harmful for those in isolation. I've done extensive research on the topic of prison reform and the effects of solitary confinement. I've also spent the time learning from someone who has been through the prison system and has experienced solitary confinement. Isolation causes mental and physical harm to inmates, as well as it is more expensive than the general facilities. There are better ways to utilize isolation that will maintain the safety of the facilities, and our society and prison system will benefit from reducing the use of solitary. Isolation causes mental and physical harm to inmates, as well as being more expensive. Solitary confinement has been proven to cause physical harm to inmates because of the tight space and the fact that humans weren't intended to stay in an 8 by 10 foot room for 22.5 to 24 hours a day. According to a study conducted by PLOS One journal, skin irritations and weight fluctuations were the most common of these. Participants experienced both as comorbid and anxiety and other health issues. There has also been instances of vitamin D deficiencies because of the lack of sunlight. The policies and practices of the facilities have neglected the medical needs of inmates, exacerbating physical ailments. In the same study, they talked to inmates that had worsened kidney stones, sciatica, hypertension, and more. As you can imagine, isolation causes and worsens the mental health issues of inmates. According to the International Journal of Prisoner Health, these negative mental health effects of solitary confinement are well documented. Insomnia, anxiety, panic, disturbances in appetite, paranoia, and hallucinations and self-mutilation are commonly experienced by isolated persons. You're simply alone with your thoughts for days and hours on end. So, kind of causes them to go crazy and hallucinate things that didn't happen. Prisoners experiencing prolonged isolation lose the ability to organize their lives around meaningful activities and purpose. Often they recede further into isolation, alienate themselves from others, and face intolerable levels of frustration. that for some turns to anger and sometimes sudden and uncontrollable outbursts of rage, which is kind of the opposite of what they're intending of trying to keep people safe. It just forces them to be so angry and alone with their thoughts and also disconnect from hope. There are better ways to utilize isolation that will maintain the safety of the facilities. The first way I recommend is to decrease the use of solitary would be to get rid of it as a form of discipline unless it is being used to handle violent offenses. So kissing another inmate should not be a reason to put somebody in solitary confinement. Secondly, prohibiting the use of solitary confinement for at-risk individuals such as juveniles, mentally ill, pregnant, and elderly, because it will exacerbate their issues. Lastly, requiring frequent reviews to work towards the individual getting back to the general prison population. Our society and prison system will benefit from reducing the use of solitary. Inmates released from prison that have been in solitary confinement were not mentally okay and are often unable to function in society. It's more likely for somebody who has been put in solitary confinement to die rather quicker than it is if they were in normal prison population. According to the American Psychological Association, prisoners released directly from supermax prisons into the community committed new crimes sooner than prisoners who had been transferred from segregation into the general prison population for several months before being released. Solitary confinement in supermax prisons are significantly more expensive to operate because less inmates fit in the facilities. By reducing the use of solitary, it would save tax money. So overall, it would be better for our society. So isolation causes mental and physical harm to inmates as well as it is more expensive than normal facilities. And there are better ways to utilize isolation that will maintain the safety of the facilities. Our society and prison system will benefit from reducing the use of solitary. So when it comes to voting time, look for candidates fighting for prison reform and that see the need to reduce the use of solitary confinement. Thank you. This is my audience, Chris and Carrie Camden and Grace Camden.